must have seen some videos on Pinterest or Facebook with the people pouring paint, and I'm like, I want to learn how to do that because it was just cool, honestly. But once you get into paint pouring, it's actually a lot more technical.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 166 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with the featured Artist of the Month for February. Please welcome Beth Erickson. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview local business owners, comedians, singers, and more. I dive into their backstory to find out how they got where they are, what are some of the tips for you to do the same, and find out where they are going. Tune in every week as I interview more of the people you see every day. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. Happy Valentine's Day! This is our Valentine's Day release. Although, now thinking about it, this is not at all a Valentine's themed episode. Yeah, that's how we roll here at the Camano Voice. We don't plan ahead. We just kind of release as needed on our weekly basis. And that's what you get. Sorry. Hopefully someday I'll be a better planner at all this stuff. But anyways, hope you guys are having a great day and a week. Hope you guys have some great plans for Valentine's Day. And thanks for letting me be a part of it. In the way that you're listening to the podcast, not in the way of being involved in your Valentine's Day plans. That's between you and your significant other. So I'll let that be where it is. Okay, I'm going to stop talking on that now. Thanks, guys, for jumping into another episode. Today, I am interviewing Beth Erickson, who is the featured Artist of the Month in the Loft for the month of February of 2023. So do keep that in mind if you're hearing about this stuff. She may no longer be the featured artist by the time you listen to this episode, but we do carry her stuff within the loft, so you can always come out and check those out. So, and I know we jump into this in the beginning of the episode, we knock it out right away, just because people are going to ask, well, is she related to you? Because you're Brandon Erickson, that's Beth Erickson. Funny story, No, she's not. But we get into a little bit of that as we start the episode, so I'll leave that for the episode. But she does a lot of mixed media, so that being she tries a lot of different mediums and stuff for her art forms. I think kind of one of the most unique things that she does is she does the acrylic pours, which you may have seen some of those items here in the loft. We've been carrying her for a little while now, and they just look amazing. If you've never seen an acrylic pour, they just get this really cool look to them. Of course, they're finished off with a glossy finish, so they look amazing when they're done. But a lot of times, it always reminds me of like the beach or kind of the shore, just kind of like the waves coming in and out. And a lot of the styles, a lot of the ones she's done, do kind of have integrate blues and stuff like that. But they also could be other colors and. I know she does some mason jar lids and stuff like that. So anyways, she, like I said, she does a lot of different mediums. She also does like watercolor, acrylic, so kind of some more traditional or more common ones that you would expect. And so anyways, so we get into kind of all the different things and more. We get into her background of how she got into art. And of course, we talk about the things that she's bringing to the loft for this month. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Beth Erickson. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the featured Artist of the Month for February. Welcome to the podcast, Beth Erickson.
Thank you, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and just to get it out of the way, we're not related, Erickson, although you've worked with my cousin, Dan Erickson.
Yes, I have.
There's surprisingly a decent amount of Ericksons in this area, and I feel like very few of them spell their last name the same.
Probably not, but I think mine is the best.
Mine has one less letter, so that makes that easy.
That's true.
But to be fair, almost every time if I look at someone, when I say my name, when I look down at their piece of paper, they always spell my last name this way. So
yes, yeah. K's are very popular in Erickson.
Yes. Awesome. Well, before we get started, tell us a little bit about Beth.
Well, I grew up in the Bothell Mill Creek area. Lived there for most of my life until high school when my parents decided they wanted to move out of the city, and they moved us to the Camano Island area. And then I went to California for about 7 years. I went to college down there and then lived down there for a while.
Okay.
And studied graphic design at Biola University.
Yeah.
So that's the Bible Institute of LA, but they did a liberal arts program. So, and was just there for a while and then decided to move back home.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, it sounds like you moved up here. Did you say after high school?
After
or
high school, the
after
year
high
I
school?
graduated from high school. Yeah.
Oh, good. So you got to finish out high school.
Yep.
Awesome. How was it growing up in Bothell Mill Creek?
It was good. We were involved in our church, and we just, lots of little communities to go visit. The Bothell downtown area is really cool for like arts and stuff like that. So I think I took an art class down there once when I was a kid.
Okay.
Because I was always looking for art classes, and my mom, she wanted to give us piano lessons, but I wanted art classes, and she couldn't find them.
Yeah. Very cool. And then being in that area, obviously that area has evolved so much over this time period. What was it like back then?
Oh, lots of less people. There's too many people there now. It was not as busy. It was easier to get around. Now it's just super traffic jam and can't get anywhere.
Yeah.
So.
When you go back and visit down there, do you ever are you able to find your way around and everything, or is it just so different?
I am, because I actually lived down there before I got married for a few years in the Mill Creek area. So
Okay.
yeah, I've been back and forth.
Got it. Very cool. So you mentioned that you had done, you were looking for art classes down there and weren't able to get into many. But was that something, even as a really at a young age, it was something that just always interested you?
Yes, I always wanted to be at the craft stores. I wanted to do crafts. I wanted to paint. But, money with my parents raising 3 kids limited what I could purchase and all of the things that I could do. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So where, family-wise, are your family artists? Does that seem like it comes from anywhere? Friends?
I know that my mom painted a little bit. Maybe one of my grandparents, but no, nobody else is an artist in my family. My sister's musical, so that's a different form of arts, but I am the only fine artist in the family.
Okay, very cool. So when you finally did get to take your first art class, what was that like for you then?
It was really exciting because I got to learn techniques that I couldn't teach myself, like perspective drawing or how to shade. I think I remember drawing a cat, and I thought I was going to give the drawing to my grandma. I don't think I ever did, but I learned how to shade the cat so that it looked realistic. Even though I don't do realistic art now, it's a good skill to be able to kind of go that way if you need to. So
Yeah, very cool. So then as you were going through junior high and high school, were you constantly taking art classes throughout there?
I was homeschooled for most of my career, and then I went to a private school, and then I went to public school. In high school, there was an art teacher who really thought I had a lot of skills in art, and that was encouraging. And I was going to be in a special art class, and then we moved back to homeschooling that next year.
No.
So I didn't get to do that. But the encouragement from that art teacher was very inspiring, because I'd never heard anyone say, oh, you're actually really good at what you're doing. That led me to take some classes in community college before I went to California.
Okay,
So
awesome.
I took like pottery and painting and anything I could get my hands on.
Yeah. So when you were kind of going through these different art classes and stuff, were there ones that really stood out, that is things that you really enjoyed and wanted to pursue more?
I think oil painting. I took a class for oil painting in California, and my teacher said, "You have brush strokes like they're natural, like you're not have like where did these come from?" And I'm like, I don't know. I've painted a little bit on my own, but she was just really impressed with the way that I put the paint on the canvas, so that was encouraging. And so I think oil painting, that's where I started.
Okay.
Was oil painting. But it takes a long time for oil paints to dry, and they're expensive. So, and then, of course, working became important. So art kind of went into the background for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then you did oil painting. What are some of the other mediums that you kind of played around with during that time?
At that point in time, I was just doing oil paint. I really liked it. I liked the way it stayed wet on the canvas. A couple days later, you could come back and blend in some other colors. I felt like acrylic paints dried too fast, which is interesting now that I'm doing acrylic paint. So it's like full circle. Like my parents had me start with acrylic paint because it wouldn't stain the carpet, but then I went to oil, and now I'm back at acrylic. So
Okay. Awesome. So you mentioned that you went to you started going to college at community college, and what kind of classes and stuff did you take during that time?
At community college, I was doing what's called, I think it was print technology or print something. It was like printing presses.
Mm-hmm.
So I was learning how to run a printing press, how to design the items that, because I wanted, my parents wanted me to have a job that would pay the bills, of course.
Yes.
So graphic design was where I was headed, but in community college, all they had was this print technology thing. So I'm like, well, I might as well start there. And actually gave me a good foundation for knowing how printing presses work when you have to design something on the computer, like what colors they're combining together to produce the item. So it was actually a good education, but I don't run a printing press.
Yeah, it's just funny, like that's such an old...
It is. It was very old school,
term.
but that when I was in college, that's what they were doing. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So then when you were looking at colleges, why did you pick, what was it again?
Biola.
Biola.
Because my faith is very important to me and I wanted to be at a Christian college. So I chose that college because it was one of the few Christian colleges that had art classes that you could take, along with the Bible classes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So then when you were looking at graphic design, had you had any experience with that?
I had purchased my own computer when I was in college, I think, because I loved technology, which is an odd for an artist to say. I love technology, graphic design, but I also like painting.
Yeah.
But I do. And so I had taught myself a few programs, but didn't know how to get any further without training. So it kind of was just an odd fit, like a mesh of things that I like to do.
Yeah.
So.
Just out of curiosity, what operating system did you have when you bought your first computer?
Well, it was a PC. I know I should be using a Mac,
I
but
don't know about back then.
my parents wanted me to buy something affordable. So I don't even remember the operating system, but it was old. It was like I don't know, really thick memory discs that were really thick that you could put a lot of storage on. I don't remember what they were called.
The floppy disks?
No,
or the zip
one,
ones?
the zip ones.
Yeah,
we were
zip
using the
drive,
zip
yeah.
drives.
Yes. I remember when I would play around, when I would use my computer, my parents' computer. The most fun part was really just taking a floppy disk and shoving it in, and then pushing the eject button. That was the most satisfying, like
The noise,
fidgeting thing. All of it.
Yeah.
Like, even to this day, like if I see that, I'm like, I really want to just take one and put it in there. Very cool. Yeah, and then just I like technology, and I like kind of learning about what's happening and what's
Yes.
coming up. And that's the reason I asked that question, because I was like, I got started on like Windows 95. And so I was messing around with that, and then 98 came out and used that for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just
Well, now I'm fully Mac, Apple-based, so.
Yes. Yeah, I am as well. But I would say it did take me until Apple jumped into the Intel world
Oh, yeah.
for me to switch
Yeah.
over.
I remember at college, though, I had a PC in my dorm room and Macs in the computer lab, and at that time, their files didn't go back and forth very well. So I had to spend all my time down in the computer lab trying to get my work done because my computer in my dorm room was not working correctly.
Oh, yes. All right. So then, as you got started in graphic design, what were pieces that, from your working with physical painting and stuff like that, how did that kind of transfer as you moved into graphic design?
I think it transfers in the fact that when I design something, I like to try and find photos of like artwork, textured things to use in the backgrounds of what I design, and a lot of like watercolor, like clip art and stuff throughout my designs, so that it brings that feeling of fine art to the designs, but it's still done on the computer.
Yeah. Awesome. So then, as you were going down that career path, was that something? Was that unique when you were doing that type of stuff? Did most people kind of try and do like the more modern twist on things?
I think that my design style compared to those of my classmates was a lot not as modern. I was more of a traditional, so I wasn't considered cutting edge like the rest of so in art school, like graphic design school, I hated critiques because my designs never met the expectations of the class. Like they weren't cutting edge enough. They weren't, I don't know, modern enough or something. So I hated that part of design school. But now as an artist and an adult, I have taken owned my design, like the way I design or the way I paint, and it's become my own thing. And I don't let people unless somebody wants a change to something that I'm designing for them, which is fine. But people's critique doesn't affect me as much as it did as when I was in college. And I think that's hard when you're just fresh out of high school or young adult and you're in college and you're getting critiqued and you're not confident in your skills. It's hard to continue down that path. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. Especially, the younger you are, the more affected you are by critiques and things like that.
Yes.
And you were talking about modern design, but what I always think of is I know this was probably a little later, but like in the 90s or like early 2000s, when you did like a PowerPoint, like they had if you see a PowerPoint from the 90s, you can immediately look at it and be like, yep, that's from the 90s.
I think that has to do with font choices. Like there weren't as many font choices.
Yeah.
I was just talking to somebody and he was talking about the Avatar logo.
Yeah.
And he played me this thing that said, why is it in papyrus? Because papyrus is the font that no one uses anymore. Like designers don't like it. And the Avatar logo is actually typed in papyrus. And it's hideous, honestly.
Yeah, at least it didn't drop down to Comic Sans.
True,
but,
true. You are that's true.
But yeah, and even the way they did you get a little bit of that now if you look at like templates and stuff. But in the 90s, like their templates were very these flashing lines going this cutting across the
Yes.
slide.
Now it's a little more subtle.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that also programs have originally probably didn't have a way to do a gradient or blend things, which made it so you had to do very harsh lines.
Yeah.
But now the programs are so much advanced that you can do practically anything.
Right. And it's gotten a lot easier. So for dumb people like me to jump in and actually make something.
Do you use Canva?
I don't. I use Affinity Designer.
Oh, yes. Dan Erickson liked that too.
Yes. I did use Canva for a little bit. And for those listeners, can you explain a little bit on Canva?
Oh, Canva they claim to be the program that anyone can be a designer. It's lives online based on a website, and it allows you to put together a design like a professional designer would, but you still have to have some skills to get something that looks good.
Right.
So.
Yes. And that's something I did Affinity Designer specifically because of the price point.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of design work, and usually it doesn't. I'm going to say this and you're going to flame me for it, but I was like, it doesn't usually matter on my design
Always
side.
matters. Always matters.
But people they're like, Brandon probably did that one. But usually I'm doing informational things of order this thing or do this thing or, usually less exciting things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember when I started doing a little bit of things or if I had to do a poster or something, my brother-in-law would help me a lot on things, and he was more not so much on the graphic side, but he understands fonting and layout.
Oh,
and how important that is. And I always defaulted growing up. This is how I was. I always defaulted to center aligned on everything.
Oh no.
And he's like, no, you want lines invisible lines around down your text from top to bottom. That's how it should line up.
Yeah.
I'm like, but then it's not centered in the middle of the poster. He's like, I know.
And it also depends on if you're using a background image, how best to align that text on top of that image or around that image. So.
Yes. Yeah, he did a lot of those things. And then when we got into when I was starting to get into a little bit of marketing and stuff, I would be like, well, I want to use I just want a picture of a croissant. And then I want to say good morning with your whatever. It's well, then you got to figure out what your angle you want to shoot. You want to know where your text is going to be before you take the picture. I'm like, can't I just take 100 good pictures? He's like, no.
Well, you could if you want to spend that much time on it.
Right. Well, not to mention my pictures, when I say good pictures, that's very relative.
Okay.
So, but yeah, so Canva is, I think, a great tool because it does have some little pieces along the way, but definitely has limitations.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and yeah, again, Affinity Designer, for those who don't know, it is the Mac-based somewhat designer. It lets you do layouts. There's a photo version.
And it's free, isn't it?
But it's a flat price.
Flat price.
It's I think it's $50 for the whole thing, but you get everything.
Everything, yeah.
And you don't have to pay monthly. And since I don't use it enough, I can never justify spending a monthly amount on Adobe products.
True.
So, but yeah, my brother-in-law is Adobe all the way, and every time I send him a file, he's like, so. Very cool. So then getting into graphic, you get into graphic design. Once you graduated, what did you do after that?
Well, so I didn't actually graduate. I ran out of money. So I took all of my art classes and my graphic design classes before I left college. So I didn't have a degree. So that made it hard to get started. So I started at a little tiny company that did grocery advertisements for newspapers. And all I got to do was place in the art, like the fruit or the canned good that went with what was supposed to be on there, and do the typesetting. I didn't get to really design anything. Occasionally, if we had free time, they wanted us to design like ideas for new ads, but I don't think they ever got used. So, so that was my first job, and it didn't pay very well. And I was down in California, and it costs a lot to live down there.
Yeah.
So then I moved to Kinko's. I don't know. And
really?
Yeah,
okay.
I did. I made photocopies, cut things in half, helped people with the photocopy machines, all of this.
Bringing back your printing press
That's
experience.
right, I was. And then I decided to move back to Washington, and Kinko's would let me transfer. So I transferred to a Kinko's up here, and it was in Shoreline, and I was living on the island. So
Wow.
Imagine that commute. It was not fun. So then I actually got a job at Skagit Valley Herald.
Okay.
Doing ad design for them. But my dream was, when I started graphic design, was always to be in magazine production.
Okay.
So I worked at the Herald for, 4 or 5 years. Then I worked at the Stanwood Camano News for 7 years.
Okay.
Doing their phone book and laying out the newspaper and designing ads and doing print shop work. Like we used to do business cards and flyers for people. And then finally I got a job in magazine down in Seattle.
Okay.
For a company called Media Index Publishing.
Okay.
And they did Northwest Sportsman magazine, Western shooting, so hunting, fishing, and guns.
Okay, perfect.
And I know nothing about those things, but I was laying out their magazines.
Nice.
Yeah, and building ads for them. So that was exciting. And then I got married, and I needed to move and not commute to Tequila. So I quit my job and started just doing Etsy, like invitation designs and things like that.
Okay.
And then, if you want my whole work history, now I work at Camano Chapel as their website person, graphic design, communications.
Okay.
And do art and graphic design on the side.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So when you started, because I feel like a lot of times people have this idea or plan of what they would like to do in their future. When you finally got to actually work and design on magazines, what was that like for you? And I think a lot of people don't know the background of like what goes into that. So can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
So it's not as glamorous as I thought it would be. Is the first thing. I mean, you have like multiple editors and writers that you're working with. You have all these ads that need to be built. You have to figure out how many pages the magazine can be to hold the ads and the articles. I mean, there's a lot of just little technical things you have to do, and I was the assistant production manager for a while before I left, so I had to learn how to do the math to figure out like how many pages to hold the ads, and I'm like, math is not my strong suit. This is not gonna work. So, but the best part about it was laying out the stories. Like you got to, be creative with where the photos went and put headlines in creatively. But it was the little things like, oh, well, you have to flow this story around a bunch of ads. You can't just design it however you want.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was a lot more limitations to it than I think I imagined in my head. So, like, if you see, like, a lifestyle magazine, I think they have a lot more room on their pages because their ads probably cost more, where they don't have ads interrupting the flow of the design or, like, the aesthetic of the design. But this one was very ad-heavy, and so it made it hard to design around those things. But there's a lot of... and then, like, sending it off to the printer is, like, a day of work. Like, making all the PDFs, making sure they're all, like, processed right. So it's a lot more technical than fun design.
Yeah. Well, and the color schemes and all those different pieces along the way.
Yeah.
And, like... I know for me, now granted, I do like I said, very simple when it comes to graphic design, but the amount of times where I finish something, I get it all done, I'm like, okay. And I don't even have to put it into I forget what I know there's technical terms for all this.
A PDF?
Well, not just PDF, but when you put it into like the high res version of that.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And it takes a long time, and your computer's like crunching forever.
Yeah.
But like, I'll print something, get it to print, and get it done, and then I'm like, I've got one, either a word misspelled
Yep.
or
Yeah.
one thing off.
And then you have to go in and fix it and print it all again.
Yes. So,
But imagine in a magazine, if there's a huge error, we just have to live with it. Because once we've sent it off to the printer and they've printed it, now you've got a magazine flying around with an error in it. So
Oh, my word.
that was like a lot of pressure, like to make sure that everything was done like correctly.
actually right
Yeah.
and perfect.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So then over this time, you've been working in graphic design and all of that during that time period. Were you also continue to do your arts and stuff on the side?
I actually didn't have a lot of time for art until I got married.
Okay.
So once I was married and not working, I had a lot more time. I had a room in our house where I kind of made it into my studio, started painting more. And then I think actually COVID helped a lot.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but it's true because I was working from home. And so it's hard to find enough to do when you're working from home. So I would sit at my desk, with my Teams up so I could see if anybody needed me, and I was watercoloring at my desk while I was working. So I think that's really got me back into it. And then my parents on their property built me a studio shed so that I could start actually, really doing art. And acrylic pouring is very messy. So you need to have space to actually leave it to dry and be able to get paint everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like in this past year that I've really gotten back into it.
Okay. Awesome. So we've got to learn a lot of your kind of past history of different types of art forms. What are the things you kind of dove in when you finally got to jump back into it all?
So I started with watercolors, and then I must have seen some videos on Pinterest or Facebook with the people pouring paint, and I'm like, I want to learn how to do that because it was just cool, honestly. But once you get into paint pouring, it's actually a lot more technical than just throwing paint down on a canvas and spinning it or tilting it or blowing on it to move it around. Like, you have to know how to mix everything. Like, there's a pouring medium that you put your paint into. You have to know how to mix that. There's a cell activator that helps make all the little cells in the paintings. You have to know how to mix that. And then you have to get all the consistencies just right for the painting to turn out. I think I wasted, canvases like every other day, but you scrape them off. So you pour on them, you don't like it, you scrape it off. But there's only so many times you can scrape a canvas off and still have it be useful.
Yep.
So it took a long time and lots of experimenting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So then, what is that process for? Because I feel like that is an art form that probably very few people kind of understands. I think like watercolor or oil makes sense. They understand kind of the gist of it. Walk us through a little bit of acrylic pouring.
So basically, acrylic pouring starts with what's called a pillow paint. And the pillow paint is anything from, well, it's not anything. I use a house paint. It's a certain type of house paint. So that goes down on your canvas first as like the cushion that your paint's going to flow across. And then you layer your paints, like your color combinations, which you have to really think about color combinations because using the wrong ones could muddy the painting and like you won't be able to see any of the other colors.
Yeah.
So you layer your colors in puddles up, whatever combinations you're using, up, and then on the very top you put what's called a cell activator, and that is made out of a product that's from, well, I use a product from Australia called Australian Floetrol, mixed with gloss varnish, I think that's right. It's been a while since I did a pour painting because I've been working on other things. And so then you put that on the very top, and then you have to use air and blow down on it. So I usually used an airbrush gun, but with no paint in it, just the air, to blow it and spread it out and break up the cell activator on top of the paint. And then you would either tilt or spin the painting to spread it out and thin out the paint. And that's when the cells start to pop up, is when you move the paint around on the canvas.
Okay.
It's kind of like it's a reaction between the cell activator and the acrylic paint. And then you just continue spreading it out till you like the composition, but you also have to have the paint thin enough so that when it dries, it doesn't crack.
Okay.
So you have to know I have to keep going, and I'm going to lose sections of the painting that I love because I have to thin out this paint and get it off the canvas.
Yeah. Very cool.
And then you let it dry for a couple of days and then coat it with, I like to use varnish because resin is very temperamental, but a lot of people use resin.
Okay.
Because you use a lot of metallic paints in paint pouring, and the resin makes them like sparkle even more than varnish does.
Got it. Very
so
cool.
It's a long process.
Yeah. Yeah. And what does that normally, is that like a day that you're doing this whole thing?
It takes about an hour to mix up the paint. And then the painting process is usually, depending on how many you're going to do, another hour. And then you let them dry for like 3 days.
Okay.
And then coat them with something.
Okay.
So it's like a 3 or 4 day process.
Yeah. Nice.
You have to have like a nice, drying surface has to be perfectly level, like where you're drying the paintings, else the cells will dissipate. Like if it's not level, for some reason they like get wobbly and like don't stay.
Okay. And when you say cells, what can you explain that a little further?
They're like, a cell is, that's hard. So it's like where color has formed like, it looks like a puddle kind of, but like the colors like maybe are like blend into one another.
Okay.
And then there's like a white or black or whatever your cell activator color is line around it that separates it from the rest of the painting.
Okay.
Which I have 3 pieces coming next week that are pour paintings. So they have cells on them.
Awesome. Very cool. So be sure to come and check those out if you want to get a better representation. So in that then, you also... do you also do this on, because you've talked about doing on canvas. Can this be done on other mediums?
I do it on all kinds of things, actually. Mason jar lids is one of the ones that I like to do the most. And so it's like a bamboo mason jar lid I buy off of Amazon. And then I tape it all off so that only the top gets paint on it. And then I put resin over it so that people can use that on their mason jars. What else? I've done it on journal covers, bookmarks. I mean... anything really, any solid surface.
Okay. Now, if you do that on like a like something that's already flat and stuff, doesn't that create like a where it becomes uneven on that surface, or does the final resin thing kind of
the final resin makes it level, but also the paint, if you thin it out enough, it dries level. Okay. So if you have too thick of paint, that's when you get divots. But if your paint is thin enough, it'll dry pretty level.
Okay. Awesome. So, so this is acrylic pouring. What are some of the other mediums that you've used and worked with?
Recently, I've started using acrylic ink, watercolors, and watercolor ink, which is a liquid watercolor. Okay. And kind of mixing acrylic ink and watercolor together. Okay. And then I'm also going to have a painting this next month that has... paste. It's like molding paste on it, like that you can put shapes into, and then you paint over the top of it with acrylic paint. Okay. So it's got more texture to it on the canvas. What else? Oh, stained glass has become a hobby. I'm not selling that, but every artist should have a hobby they do on the side besides the stuff they're trying to sell. So I've been working with some stained glass. Okay. Very cool. So the combining of the watercolor ink and the acrylic stuff, what advantages does that give you when you're using it? So the way I've been doing it is watercolor as the underpainting, like with all of the tones that watercolor can have, like from light to dark. So an underpainting, and then I use the acrylic ink to like highlight areas of that. Because it's more solid, like it doesn't show through as much. So to outline a leaf or to add detail to a leaf or something like that. So on top of the watercolor. Okay, very cool. All right, and then what other forms of things are you making and crafting and creating? Oh, I also do crochet. Okay. I've been selling those as crochet hats beanies down here. Okay. And let's see, what else do I do? Crochet. I think that's about it. I think I've covered everything. Okay. Very cool. Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about the pieces that you're going to be bringing to Loft. I know you mentioned a few of them already. Right. So there's a kind of like a set of 3, but I'm going to sell them separately, of pour painting pieces that are like, to me, they look like a abstract sunset or sunrise. So water and orange and red. And that's a set of 3. And then I have some watercolors, one of a crab, and then some abstract type watercolors. And what else? Oh, and I did some watercolors for mason jar lids. So I painted watercolor on a piece of watercolor paper, cut it out, and glued it to a mason jar lid, and then put resin over the top of it. Okay. So it's something new that I'm trying. So we'll see how they do, but they look really cool. So yeah, just a mix of things. Awesome, very cool.
And then I know that on top of, so you mentioned that you work at the chapel and do some of their stuff, but then you're also doing some other stuff. So can you tell us just a little bit about the stuff that you do on the side as well, some of your services and things like that?
I mostly do graphic design on the side. I have a couple contract jobs, one for some school districts in the Midwest where I design flyers for them and they insist on using Canva. So I do that in Canva. But I do anything, wedding invitations, business card designs, flyers, websites. I've got into websites since I worked with Dan.
Yeah.
So I've done a few websites, and recently a lot of people at the church have needed memorial slideshows, so I've started doing those.
Okay.
And so just really whatever creative outlet I feel like my graphic design is a form of my creative business per se, because it's very creative.
Yeah.
But it's more sitting at a computer though than hands-on art. But
Yeah.
I enjoy all aspects of art. So
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so this is something, because whenever I find out people are artists and also enjoy technology, I have to jump into this because it is a hot topic right now.
Okay.
But have you done any research or looking into AI assisted art or AI tools or things like that? Has any of that?
Oh my gosh, I just saw somebody post a podcast about something about AR ruining art, and I didn't listen to it yet. Darn it.
Part 2 coming later.
Well, I don't use AI. I don't know that well, but I do use some of my computer and like a Cricut, a vinyl cutting machine to cut things out for me. So I mean, I see the benefits of combining the two, but I don't know that I'll ever get there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I just think there's certain tools. The AI art is like one big piece that I know there's a lot of conversation around.
Yeah.
But like things like ChatGPT on like assistance with marketing, or like, I know there's a lot of people using it to kind of revamp their website from an SEO perspective.
Oh, no, I haven't even looked into that. So.
Okay.
But I don't like SEO. I don't like trying to figure it out.
Well, now you don't have to.
Oh,
AI's
good.
there for
I need
you.
to look into this then. It's too technical for my brain.
Yes. Yeah, no, the SEO piece has always been like a magic
It is.
thing,
It's
a black
like
box.
just the right combination of everything gets you good SEO.
Right.
It's hard to figure out.
Yes. Very cool. All right. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
My soldering iron I use for stained glass.
Oh, very cool.
It's a battery-powered, cordless one. I really
Okay.
like it.
Very cool. Whenever I think of soldering, I think of it for electronics.
I know. Most people do.
And there's so many things, videos, things I've watched. I'm like, okay, I could probably do this. Like, it's unscrewing stuff, it's putting stuff down, and then they're like, and then you just solder the wires, and I'm like, nope, can't do it anymore.
Well, stained glass soldering is very different from wire soldering.
Yes.
I'll just tell you that.
Yes, very cool. All right, who is the most influential person outside of your family in your life?
I would have to say that my faith is really influential. So God, I in my art always look at the fact that I'm portraying His creation and that He gave me the abilities to be an artist. But also, and this is not a brag on the loft, but Lydia is like the best encourager when it comes to art, and she's taught me a lot lately, just in conversations we've had up here in the loft. So,
very cool. Yes, I would second that as well. It's awesome. All right, this is a fill in the blank question. I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to blank.
travel to Europe. It's
Okay.
not weird.
Yes. Very cool. Do you guys have any plans to try and make that happen?
No, not currently.
Okay. All right. Who is an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next?
Oh, I was thinking about this one, and there's so many people in our area. I was going to say Josie Colby, the worship director at the chapel.
Okay.
Because she has just lots of life insights and thoughts that are always going through her head. She's always talking about stuff at church, and I'm like, wow, I haven't even ever thought of that. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Very cool. And lastly, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
To be more patient and not push ahead in life decisions, and to be more confident in my skills as an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And everyone that's listening, be sure, if you're listening to this in the month of February or rolling into February, Be sure to stop by the loft and check out her pieces that she's bringing up here. So thank you again for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you.
All right. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Beth Erickson for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. That's CamanoCommons.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.